One thing that we're asked a lot about, obviously people are aware on our amplifiers that you can switch on the back so that the amp will operate for 115 volts or 120 volts nominal wall voltage, or 240 volts in this country, or 230 for mainland Europe. I think this country is supposed to be 230, but it's generally higher. Yes, you can. It'll work most places in the world, just switching between 115 volts or 120 volts and 230 volts. But one thing you need to be careful of is when you change to a lower mains voltage, you need to change the mains fuse. For instance, a lunchbox head will have a mains fuse for use in mainland Europe and the UK of 1 amp, and it needs to be a T1 amp, which is a time delayed fuse rather than a fast blow fuse, so that it'll cope with an initial current surge, which it's not going to see any time after the initial switch on and magnetising of the transformer. So when you switch to 115, 120 volts for use in America, for instance, you need to put a 2 amp mains fuse in. No damage will result if you don't, but it'll pop. And I think we've had occasions where American customers have bought amplifiers from the UK and it's been supplied with a 1 amp mains fuse, and depending on the part of the cycle, the 60 hertz mains cycle they have in America, sometimes you'll get away with switching it on with a 1 amp fuse and it will work quite happily, but sometimes you won't, and it will be entirely dependent on which part of the cycle you switch the mains on. So when you're switching the mains voltage down, you need to put a larger value mains fuse in. Now, for use in Japan, their mains voltage is 100 volts, a nominal 100 volts. You can switch the amplifier down to 120 volts and it will probably run. It may sound a bit lacking and a bit weak, but it will run, and nothing will get damaged particularly. But normally, if an amplifier is to be shipped to Japan, then we wire it specially for use in Japan. The mains transformers that we fit can cope with 100 volts mains supply, because obviously the same amount of power needs to be drawn anywhere in the world. A 50 watt amplifier needs to be able to put that out, for instance, so it needs to draw a certain amount of current anywhere in the world. So the lower the mains voltage, the more current it will need to draw to provide that power. So generally, well, not generally, it's a fact, that the lower the mains voltage, the more power and the more current will be drawn. So just be aware of that. So I think really to clarify and to sum up, if you buy your amplifier in the territory for which it's been switched to, wired for, etc., it'll be fine. So if you buy it in the US, you'll have the switch set to 120 volts and you'll have a 2 amp or whatever, you'll have the correct mains fuse installed. So do be aware that if you're buying outside, so if you're, say, buying from the UK but you live in America, or vice versa, you may buy a second-hand one, just check the mains fuses, what it says on the back for your territory, for where you live, then you'll be all right. But that seems to be where sometimes we've had a bit of a problem, is where, say, something's been bought from the UK and the fuse pops in America, and all of a sudden there's some concern that we're shipping inferior goods or what have you. It's not the case, it's just that you need to pay attention to the fuse rating on the back of the amp.